So as I've said today, just to kind of give you a little bit about me, for those of you that aren't familiar with me, I've been working here for more than 18 years now, and I'm in charge of new business development, which is a lot, but I love sitting down with people like John and Steve and the other Steve and Vince and learning about their methodologies. And I've taken a big role in kind of recruiting people over to the MetaStock platform that kind of have large student bodies, and it's really a great job. It's allowed me to really learn a lot about my personal trading, and it's been great. Absolutely love it. Let's go. That's all I have to say about me. So today's, since I am talking for about an hour, I'm going to go ahead and read our legal disclaimer just so that we can keep the attorneys happy. Today's demonstration is designed to instruct you on MetaStock and the accompanying software plugins. It's not a recommendation to buy or sell, but rather guidelines to interpreting and using specific indicators and features within the software. The information, software, and techniques presented today should only be used by investors who are aware of the risk inherent in trading. MetaStock shall have no liability for any investment decisions based on the use of the software, any trading strategies, or any information provided in connection with the company. I think that's time number 3 that we went through that today, so maybe by the end of the day you'll have it memorized just like I do. So we are going to slow down just a little bit here. I want to kind of go ahead and show you the forecaster. Obviously, MetaStock's a huge package. We've been working on it since 1982, and has a lot of really, really cool things. As a presenter, I'm challenged in terms of what I want to show you every time we come up here and start to talk about it. Obviously, it does do scanning. We've talked a lot about scanning. It is one of the few platforms that are available where you can go in and actually scan any of the markets that you're interested in. And it's not like one of those things where you have to define what stocks you want to scan against in advance. You just say, hey, show me all the optionables that are doing this. Show me all the ETFs that are doing this. Makes it very, very easy. And by far, scanning sells programs for us. I mean, the ability to go through 4,000 stocks and just identify just the ones that are interesting to you or have the patterns that you're interested in is one of our keyest and most unique features in the program. With most of the experts that we've had on today, we've integrated expert advisors, which allow you to kind of go in and see the buy and sell setups, allows you to get specific feedback on the chart. With a lot of the experts, we actually tell you exactly where to buy, exactly where the stop losses are. You know, it's a very, very cool feature. And also included, and not covered today, is system testing. And we have one of what I consider one of the most powerful testers in the industry. You have the ability, again, to go through and just crunch through massive amounts of data to really boil down what works and what works well in the markets you're looking at about. And so we're not going to talk about that either, but the reason I kind of bring up all of these points is I just want you to understand that we're going to get really, really narrow in what we're talking about today. I'm going to spend my entire time on kind of the forecaster. And the forecaster is a very unique tool to MetaStock, but that's not all MetaStock. The whole point is it's just not the whole toolbox. There's a lot of things that are very, very valuable in there. And that's helped us actually we've been rated #1 in our price category for about, I think it's 21 years in a row right now, by the readers of Stocks and Commodities magazine. So not by the editors, which we have obviously a great relationship with, but by the people that read the magazine. They've rated us #1 21 years in a row. So that's enough of a setup. If you have questions as we go through it, we don't have a lot of time to talk about this today. I am going to do an official QA session at the very end. After Don Fishback speaks, we'll stay in here as long as we need to answer questions and come back in and talk about some things. But if you have questions about the forecaster as we go ahead and ask, and I'll do my best within the time that I'm allotted to kind of get to those for you, okay? Awesome. Okay. So let's go ahead. I've already got the forecaster chart open, and I already mentioned that we kind of do a lot of system testing and that kind of stuff. The forecaster's quite a bit different. We've got a patent pending on it, and the way I like to kind of introduce the concept of the forecaster, the way I think it makes sense for a lot of people, is obviously everybody's familiar with the idea of system testing. With system testing, we say, okay, here's my system. I buy when my MACD goes above 0, and I sell when it goes down below 0. Now test that, and if I do that every time, tell me how that works in the marketplace. The forecaster is a little bit along the same lines of that, but quite a bit different as well. What it says is every time something happens in the chart, let's say I get a MACD signal, or a 52-week high or a 52-week low, what is the subsequent price movement after that statistically? And so keep in mind, that's what we're looking at. We're looking at probabilities, and we're looking at a lot of math when we start to look at a forecaster chart. Let me show you kind of the built-in events with MetaStock to kind of give you an idea of what we're doing here. All of these hand-drawn patterns are stuff that I'm going to talk a little bit about as well, but we're going to get back to those. The forecaster, its engine is going to have like, okay, 5 days up or more, 5 days down or more, 52 weeks high, 52-week low, Bollinger breakout, CCIs overbought, oversold, the LCI stuff, moving average crossovers, RMO buy, RMO sell, those type of things. So when you initially open it up with a chart, I've opened it up with Dow, what it's going to do is it's going to go through all of those patterns and statistically look at the chart and say, okay, well, when this happened, what was the subsequent price movement? And is there a statistical correlation with that? Let me go ahead and click back here on the forecast analysis screen, and I'll kind of give you an idea of what that means. So here I'm looking at a standard price bar. I'll come back to the buy and sell arrows, and here are the events that we've found on this chart. There's an LCI resistance pivot bounce, and I've got this sorted by the most recent events. Okay, or the most events. There's a couple of different ways you can sort these out. So when I kind of highlight a pattern, you'll notice that the arrows are going to change based on what pattern I've got highlighted. Okay, these aren't buy and sell signals necessarily. They're just event markers. This shows you when the event happened on that particular chart. Okay, so let me go back up to the LCI pivot bounce. And to kind of give you an idea of what we're doing here, I'm just going to go ahead and focus on the statistical report over here. Okay, so this LCI resistance pivot bounce occurred 31 times within the last 1,800 days. On average, the event occurs every 43 days. The shortest gap between the pattern is 1 day, and the longest gap is 265 days. Now here's where we kind of we go in and start to determine what happens afterwards. Statistically, 7 days after the event occurs, the probability of 95%, the closing price is about 0.44% higher. There's a standard deviation of 0.0176. And then 14 days after the event occurred, within about 95% probability, the closing price is about this much higher. So what we're looking at is every time this event happens on the chart, we statistically look and say, okay, how much has it changed? 7 days, 14, 30, 60, and so forth, to kind of see what the statistical patterns is. Now, one thing that I do want to point out is we're not just looking at statistics. Some of the things that we look at have to do with our patent application. But the idea here is, okay, what happens after this event occurs? Is it statistically significant, isn't it, or is it not? How statistically significant is it? And the end product of that, I'm just going to go ahead and scroll this back down. That was just to give you an idea of what we're looking at. The product of that analysis is what we do is what we draw out a forecast cloud. So right here, every time this LCI resistance pivot bounce occurred, generally within a probability scale, it's likely to go higher. Okay, and to kind of determine how likely it is, you need to look over here on the right-hand side of the chart. On the right-hand side, you'll see right here the darker blue shaded areas are dark blue. The lighter areas, as it gets lighter and lighter and lighter, or more intense, is how likely it is to be more probably accurate. Okay, or how higher the probability is, to say that in probably a smarter way. Okay, just going to check to see what kind of questions Trevor asks, does this cover the UK market? It does, Trevor. Lennox says, are you recording the webinar? We are recording the webinar. Matthew says, my voice went Terminator. I'll be back. And then he said it got better. Okay, very cool. So that's kind of the whole idea here, is what we want to do is we're not saying here, okay, the LCI pattern is the best pattern. What we want to do is we want to identify those patterns or those setups that have the most statistical significance. And we do that by looking at and eyeballing the forecast cloud. Okay, so here we've got kind of the recognized events. This is a pretty good one right here. I like the intensity of the cloud. Obviously, more intensity, the closer you get to yellow on this scale, the more probable it is. So yellow is obviously the best type of a pattern. And then we can kind of go in and look at and identify some of the other patterns that are available to see what we like. Here's an RMO buy signal, and you'll notice right here, you've got kind of a lot more probability associated with that. Okay. Now, by default, your forecast cloud, the length of this cloud is going to be tied to the pattern that you're using. So if you're looking at a 52-week high, for example, it's going to be forecasting that out over 80 days. Whereas with an RMO buy signal, we're looking at 90 days. And most of the shorter term patterns, like the candlestick patterns, are going to be like 30 days. Okay, so you can manually override that. So if we wanted to see what this looked like over 180 days, we can click on that and it'll actually show us a map out for the next 180 days after the event's recognized. Okay, once we find a cloud that we're pretty happy with or that has the probabilities that we like, what we can do is we can come back here into the price chart and we can actually overlay the cloud on the chart. So if we go ahead and click on this, it's actually going to show us how that chart would look going into the future. And you'll notice with this RMO cloud, it stayed right in that high probability zone and probably will continue to do so as the rest of this pattern comes out. Okay, looking at the time, 5 minutes. How fun is that? We can, of course, now if you click on some of these earlier events, this is event number 13. And with the statistical analysis that we do, every event is taken into account when this forecast cloud is drawn. Now, if I do an event in the past, though, you'll notice that the cloud formations are going to look quite a little bit different, because if I click on this event, it's going to draw me a cloud that was built up until this event. It's going to ignore subsequent price patterns, so we can kind of see how it looked over in the past as well. I'm going to change this back to the default length of 90 days as well. Okay, let's go ahead and there's a couple things that I definitely want to show here that were part of the new forecaster in version 14, and I use them all the time. So let me kind of come back here and just show you our new pattern drawing engine. A lot of people will say, okay, well, I want to be able to look at every time the Dow does a V pattern, or this particular stock does a V pattern, or that could also be like a head and shoulders pattern, or a double top, or a double bottom, or any pattern that you wanted to draw. You actually have the ability to go in and create your own patterns. So, for example, if I wanted to come in here and make a V pattern, I just go ahead and type in V pattern up here. I can determine how long that pattern needs to be by putting in the approximate price bars here. And I can say how sensitive I want it to match up with what I'm about to draw, either high, medium, or low. Okay, and I can also assign the default cloud focus, whether I want that 30, 90, or 80 days. I'm just going to leave that at 90 days. Now, to literally draw my V pattern, I literally draw it. So, for example, if I want to do a V pattern, I just kind of draw a V pattern. How easy is that? Okay. Now, I probably want to start forecasting from right here, right from the end of the hook. So that's probably where I'm going to leave it out. And now that I've got it drawn, what I can actually do is I can actually modify this pattern by clicking on any of the waypoints. So, for example, if I wanted to pull this up a little bit, I could just click on the waypoint I want to move. I can move it to exactly where I want to be. So if I didn't get it exactly correct, that's a good way to go in and modify it. I also, if I wanted to invert this pattern, I could copy this pattern out later and invert it, and then I have a kind of a topping V pattern. So it's very, very easy to kind of go in and manipulate this and kind of see what that looks like on a chart. Because of time, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and call this AAV pattern, and I'll show you how this will look on a chart. Let me go ahead and save this out. And let me try and find it. And what I'm going to do here, okay, there it is. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and disable the other pattern. So we're just doing the math on this AAV pattern that I just drew. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and rescan the analysis. And we're only doing that V pattern. So when it actually shows up on the chart, is where it's going to show the arrows. Now that I've got this sorted out, you notice we don't have a lot. We actually have barely enough to actually draw a forecast cloud. But if I highlight over these event markers, it'll show me in blue how the pattern looked, and it'll show me in red what the price activity looked like. So I can kind of compare. In this particular case, we had a 75% match. Okay, back here, if we look at this pattern, we had an 82% match. And back here, when we saw this pattern, we had an 85% match. The other thing that I can kind of do that I really like is see what the price activity is without even doing a forecast cloud. Like, for example, if I look at this pattern, it accompanied with a pretty good move up, I would say. If I look at this, followed by a major move down, of course, but I can look at this pattern, and it was followed by a pretty major move up. And I would say in both instances, it went right to the resistance area and then turned around. And I can look at this pattern and I can see. You can, of course, look at your forecast cloud. This is a really interesting cloud because we have a lot of high probability zones in here. But we can, of course, put that as a price marker. Okay, and then if we plotted that on the chart to just see, actually we don't have, it requires 4 patterns of data. So in this particular case, we don't have enough data loaded, but it would draw a forecast cloud out for us if we had a 4th pattern here. We just don't happen to have it on this chart set. All right, let me show you one other thing, and then we're going to kind of bring in our next speaker. But this is one of the patterns that I use for confirmation all the time. And we did show you how to draw our own patterns, but this is one of the things that I actually use as a confirmation every time I'm going to take a trade. And we've actually had some pretty weird sideways action in the market recently, followed by kind of this rounding curve. And what I like to do is I like to actually take that chart data and I like to push it into a pattern. So for example, if I'm looking to go short because we're kind of in a rounding top, would that make sense to do? How would that look in a pattern? What's my statistics look like? Anytime I want to kind of do some analysis like that, I can do this user-defined pattern selection. And as soon as I click on that, I can actually highlight the data that I'm interested in doing a forecast on. Okay. Now, what I usually do is just use kind of the last several days of data, because if you make the pattern too long, it's going to be too specific, and if you make it too short, it's not going to be specific enough. But we want to be able to see kind of what happens after this pattern occurs. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go ahead and define this as a chart pattern. I'm going to go ahead and click on yes. And it's going to go ahead and draw that out for me. So this is just those 7 bars that I highlighted on the chart. Okay. And now to keep it real quick, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and put a date on this. This is, let me check the date. It's May 23rd. So I'll put 523 Dow. Okay. I'll go ahead and save that as a pattern. Again, I could invert it, and I could reverse it. I could do a pattern quick test. The pattern quick test just shows me the price activity versus, so I can go back and forth in time and that kind of stuff. It's kind of cool. I'm just going to save this pattern out. I'll go ahead and rescan this analysis based on that. And now what it's doing is it's going to show me on the chart where that pattern's occurred in the past. Again, I can kind of come in here and look at, and it'll give me the actual price versus my pattern. So I can kind of see if there's a correlating behavior after this pattern occurs. And then, of course, I do have the ability to come in and say, okay, well, is it statistically significant? And in the past, what's happened when that exact pattern has happened is it's been statistically likely to kind of continue to kind of grind up, go sideways for a little bit, and within about 60 days. What this is telling me, it's about 60 to 80% likely that it's going to be up about 2.5%. So that's what the statistics are saying for it. Okay, I can come back in here. I can go ahead and click on the pattern itself, and I can see what that would look like on a chart of the Dow and trade based off of it. So very, very cool. I use it mostly when I'm looking to get into a trade. So if I was looking to take some puts, for example, right now, I might rethink them just because statistically it's likely to go up. So maybe I should be thinking about calls instead at a good price. Nyan asks a pretty good question, and I'm going to kind of go back over here for a second. How do you identify gaps? Gaps was one of the first patterns I drew. I was like, can you identify gaps? And literally, it's a pretty easy one to do. If I come back here into the event recognizer library, I can say, okay, I want a gap like this. Boom. And then I probably take out all of these waypoints. You need at least 3 patterns, but I kind of like to leave a pretty sideways area here of at least a few days, and then this will find a gap down for you. And then what I'd probably do is just remove these waypoints. I can click on them and delete them because I'd want to forecast what happens right after that gap. So this is the pattern that I would look at. So if you can draw it and if you can imagine it, you can plug it into the forecaster and do the analytics on it. Thanks for the question. We probably won't have a lot of time for other questions because I'm over time. But I'll stick around for Q&A after Don Fishback, and we can kind of talk more about the forecaster, some of the other things that you're interested in as well. Okay. Again, it's just a small overview of MetaStock. The next speaker, Logan Connors, is going to be talking about his LCI system. I would recommend you to use MetaStock. I wouldn't trade without it. I guess you could, but you could also build a house without tools too. It's just such an effective tool to help you understand your trades, find them, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Anyway, so those Summit package offers are, again, get 3 months of MetaStock RT, MetaStock Zenith data and news, Bigelow candle profit systems, his bonus pre-filter scans, 2 years of Stocks and Commodities magazine, all for the low, low price of $549, which will save you $600. You can actually call in at 800-882-3040 or chat online with us at metastock.com/sales chat. The DC is the same offer. It doesn't include Zenith, but it includes Data Link instead, and it's only $358. And it's well worth it. That'll give you plenty of time to actually understand if MetaStock can be helpful for us. We do offer a money back guarantee on the Bigelow part of that, and within 3 months, literally you'll be running MetaStock June, July, August 23rd. It's a huge amount of access to the program. Okay. Before we introduce Logan, I'd like to, again, thank our official sponsor, Stocks and Commodities magazine. Again, it's a great magazine. All registrants, as long as you opted in for the offer, you get a free copy of that. You can take advantage of any of the services today, and you're going to get a complimentary 5-month subscription if you order more than $300. So if you do either the action packs, you're going to get 2 years of Stocks and Commodities as part of it. And great magazine as well. Okay, if you just want to do MetaStock without the Steve Bigelow add-on, you can go to metastock.com/Trader Summit 3-for-1. That'll give you an extended trial of MetaStock. You can also, if you have questions, you can call in or talk to our guys as well. Okay, and of course the Traders Conference at Snowbird. It's always great to get in and see people, and it's such a good learning environment. These online classes are great, but I was just reminded about how much more effective it is to learn at an in-person event. When we went to Vegas last week with Trading Winds, the lineup of speakers is great. It's $500 off. It's normally $9.95. It's $4.95 if you do it over this weekend. And I know they're pushing the website price back up next week, so you'll want to do that right away. If you have questions about the lineup and that kind of stuff, call our guys.